Will I outsmart Karen and expose the corruption? Or will our dreams of the brownstone crumble forever? The early morning sun slanted through our kitchen window as I brewed coffee, my heart racing at the thought of finally owning a historic brownstone in Chicago. I could practically hear the echo of footsteps in the time-worn hallways, feel the warmth of family dinners to come enveloping me in snug nostalgia. It was the image I had conjured for years, one that danced just out of reach until now. My husband Jake shuffled sleepily into the room, rubbing the remnants of dreams from his eyes, blissfully unaware of the brewing storm. But then, just as I stirred milk into my cup, our neighbor Karen strode through the back door, her presence saturating the room with the overpowering scent of designer perfume and faux elegance. She was always primped and polished, seemingly untouched by the chaos of the world around her. As I exchanged pleasantries, she leaned against the kitchen counter, radiating a self-important air that made my skin crawl. "You know, I have connections in real estate. If you're not happy with your current agent," she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. I felt a surge of unease as the twinkle in her eye hinted at something more ominous. From the moment we had set our sights on that brownstone, Lisa Anderson had assured us that she would help negotiate the best offer. Like a siren's call, she lured us into believing we were making a fair bid. Yet, as the weeks went on, I began to wonder if her guidance was genuinely for our benefit. Small doubts crept in as I overheard whispers about escalating offers in the neighborhood. Jake and I had put everything we had on the line, only for Karen's words to echo ominously in my mind. Did she know something we didn't? When I finally confronted Lisa, her reaction was nothing short of disarming. I had tracked down counterfeit listings in the area, and something felt off. I asked point blank if she had shared our bid with anyone. At first, she laughed it off. But the way her gaze flickered told me more than her words. "All agents do it, Sarah. It's just business." I clenched my fists, feeling the world close in around me. The thought that she might be feeding details of our bid to other buyers, particularly Karen, sent icy tendrils of despair creeping up my spine. I tried to shake off the feeling, but my phone buzzed insistently on the counter. It was a notification from the real estate app we had used to track our listing. Karen had put in a counteroffer, and the number glared back at me like a neon sign of betrayal. It was a figure far beyond our comfort zone, a blatant power play that struck like a dagger in my chest. How could she? I gasped, the realization slamming into me with an intensity that left me reeling. Karen's offer made our bid seem like mere play money, and there it was, Lisa was cashing in at our expense. In an act of desperation, I dialed Jake as furious adrenaline pumped through my veins, but his voice remained calm on the line, urging me to take a step back. However, with each pulse of anger, I felt more strongly that they were colluding, using us as pawns in their game. "What if she's been leaking our offers, Jake?" I spilled, frustration leaking into every word. I could sense the confusion in his silence, and knew I had to act quickly before our dream turned into a nightmare. Petty rivalries surfaced quickly, and as the legalities unraveled, the atmosphere in our cozy living room shifted dramatically. I spent hours researching broker ethics, poring over local laws to see what I could unearth. The rabbit hole ran deep. I found stories of similar transgressions, dark whispers that had traveled through the city's real estate community, agents cooking the books, broker collusion with buyers, and hidden conflicts of interest amplifying the rage. I couldn't allow Lisa's unethical practices to go unchecked, nor could I let Karen, the sassy neighbor who loved to flaunt her social standing, win this brawl. Instead of an innocent brownstone, our future felt contaminated by deceit. The deeper I dug, the more united I felt with others in the community who had faced the same struggles. I was no longer just a victim. I was a voice rising against the tides of manipulation blanketing Chicago's real estate market. What should have been a dream turned into an unyielding determination. As I linked up with fellow victims, a coalition began to form, fueled by anger and injustice. I frequently exchanged texts with others, attempting to nail down the truth behind Karen's scheming and Lisa's betrayal. They inspired me to speak out, stirring the embers of my courage until it became a blaze. I would gather evidence and expose the fragile veil that concealed their unethical scheme. But first, I had to convince Jake of the gravity of the situation. Later that evening, as darkness fell, I sat on the edge of our couch with my laptop, the glow illuminating the room and draping shadows behind me. Jake walked in, and I could tell he was still processing the chaos that had unfolded. Yet as I opened my mouth to share the latest findings, the promise of triumph rang in my voice. Together, we could fight back. I could sense that this was just the beginning of exposing the dark underbelly of a world once thought sophisticated and trustworthy. The moment that concluded my frantic day was when the phone rang, an unrecognized number flashing ominously on the screen. Could this be another player in this twisted game? Or perhaps a tip-off to the truth that would change everything? I hesitated. a current of anticipation zipping through me, igniting a pulse of determination within my chest as I pondered answering the call. Late one night, the cool air in our cramped dining room was thick with tension, illuminated only by the flickering light of my laptop screen. I laid out spreadsheets like a war room, desperation gnawing at my resolve. Each figure revealed a maddening pattern I couldn't ignore. Every time we stretched our offer, Karen's counter soared higher, like a twisted poker game where the stakes kept multiplying. My heart raced as I felt my stomach twist in knots, the insidious truth that Lisa was not merely our agent, but an active participant in this sick game, sinking in like a lead weight in my gut. With every click of the keyboard, I could almost hear the clock ticking down, each second a reminder that our dreams hung precariously in the balance. As I pushed back from the table, I glanced at Jake, his brow furrowed with the same concern that clouded my thoughts. "We could go a bit higher," he murmured. But even as the words escaped his mouth, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. Would it matter? It was like trying to catch smoke with our bare hands, and the more we offered, the more power Karen seemed to wield from the dark shadows of our dealings. Together we stewed in the uncertainty, waiting for Lisa to confirm if this latest negotiation would finally settle the madness or push us deeper into the fray. What should have been the sweet thrill of homeownership became a brutal game of economic brinkmanship. I expected Lisa to share our concerns and work to stabilize the onslaught, but she flashed a cat-like grin, excitement dancing in her eyes. The Cheshire Cat smile sent alarms ringing. "You have to stay competitive. It's a seller's market, and Karen knows your limits. Just keep pushing, and we'll get it." I could see it clearly now. In her head, every counter was a siren call to her commission. While we were losing our grip, she was gaining momentum. One unsuspecting Saturday afternoon, I found a brief moment to breathe at a neighborhood barbecue, a disastrous event that shattered my fragile hope. Karen circulated, her laughter tinkling like broken glass as she shared tales of her prowess in real estate. As she boasted about her latest conquests, I overheard snippets of conversation that made my heart plummet. The details of our bids floated around the gathering, as casually as lemonade. The realization hit me like a rogue wave. Lisa wasn't just careless. She was complicit in our suffering. Our hopes dashed against the jagged rocks of treachery. I felt myself becoming unhinged, the world unresolved around me. As I watched Karen bask in the limelight of her victories, her triumph fed by our tears, I pulled Jake aside, urgency bubbling over. "It's Lisa," I whispered, gathering the pieces of a fragmented truth. "She's leaking our offers to Karen. This isn't just a bidding war, it's a trap." I could see the wheels turning in Jake's mind, but he was reluctant, too cautious. "How can we be sure?" "It's a wild assumption, Sarah." But it felt like delusion to me, an electric truth that burned in my chest, begging to be shouted into the open. Instead of resting, I turned to research a frantic exploration of broker ethics, clawing my way through the internet's dark corners. I uncovered an unsettling pattern in the very fabric of Chicago's real estate market. This was a game riddled with deceit. Every click exposed tales of conflicted interests, agents caught pushing their own financial agendas while families, like ours, suffered at their hands. I was determined to weave my own narrative into this thread of a wider misconduct, but would it have the weight to challenge the status quo? That evening, driven by fury and desperation, I returned home, arms laden with evidence. Sprawled across our living room floor like a jigsaw puzzle, I compiled the articles, testimonials, and anecdotes I'd unearthed. I couldn't let Lisa sail away on the tide of our suffering. As I typed, the sound of keys echoed in the quiet house, a flurry of newfound determination rising up within me. We might be naive, but we weren't powerless. I was sure that if we fought back, we could expose the underpinning corruption. The next morning, just as the sky began to blush with the light of dawn, I stepped outside, hoping to find some calm amidst the rising chaos. Just then, Karen strode up to me, not in the defiant manner I was expecting, but with an unsettling confidence, her voice silky. "You know, I have insider knowledge about your bid," she teased, raising a brow with an infuriating smirk. My mind raced, the stark realization that our adversary had crossed the line into personal territory, taunting us in the very neighborhood we sought to claim. In that moment, the gravity of it all slammed into me like an avalanche. This was no longer a mere bidding war. This was a battle against a systemic rot that went deeper than I had anticipated. I felt the threads of something larger simmering behind the curtain of our simple brownstone dream. I could either back down or rally, but in the face of such direct confrontation, the choice was clear. It was time to make my stand. Our dreams felt malleable, but now fueled by a newfound strength. I understood I wasn't alone in this fight. Even as I gripped the railing of my staircase, the world around me still felt unstable. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I was ready to confront the truth, whatever hideous form it dared assume. Unbeknownst to me, the dawn had only just begun to reveal the darkness lurking around every corner. The pangs of doubt nestled in my belly, intensified as we scrambled to raise our bid against Karen. Morning sunlight streamed through our kitchen window, illuminating the frantic scene where Jake and I hunched over our coffee-stained papers. We were no longer just a couple trying to buy a home. We were soldiers on a battlefield, desperately trying to secure our territory against an enemy we hadn't fully comprehended. Meanwhile, Lisa chastised us for being hesitant, her tone dripping with condescension, as she belittled our anxiety for questioning the escalating costs. "You have to protect your investment," she insisted, her manicured fingernails pointing toward the nearing deadlines on our calendar. For her, this was all about the commission, while for us, it was our dreams slipping further away. Our dreams began to unravel, tangled in the web of deceit. Lisa spun so effortlessly around us when I stumbled across an email on my partner's laptop. My heart raced as I opened the document, revealing that Karen had access to a series of confidential details about our financial standing. It was like being struck by lightning. How could the very person we were competing against have intel on our offers and limits? I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead as I read the email over and over, letting the implications of betrayal sink in deeply. We were not just being preyed upon by an ambitious rival. We had been quietly skinned by the very person we trusted to lead us. I clenched my fists, feeling powerless, yet determined to dig deeper into the murky waters of this corrupt system. My mind raced, imagining the countless scenarios of what Karen could do with this information, the victories she could snatch from us, while we stumbled around blindly in the dark. The thought of our hopes being shredded by the sacrilegious alliance of agent and rival fueled my anger. We would not be merely collateral damage in this game. With a renewed sense of urgency, I needed to gather evidence. But just as I believed I had uncovered the truth, the phone rang, and it was Lisa on the other end. "Karen just placed another offer," she declared cheerfully, as though delivering good news about a birth. My stomach dropped, and a bitter wave of nausea washed over me with the shocking news. It was an unthinkable amount designed to seal the brownstone's fate. The numbers Lisa recited twisted like a knife in my gut, a calculated strike meant to keep us off balance, while she played both sides for power and profit. "Are you sure?" I managed to choke out, my voice quivering, heart racing with every potential number that flashed before my eyes like an impending train wreck. Lisa's unyielding chirp pierced through my panic. "Absolutely. This is a serious bidding war, happy to help, of course." But I could hear the undertone of excitement in her voice, each syllable layered with the promise of commission that came with inflated bids. Such a mindset erased our aspirations, siphoning hope as quickly as it turned into cash in her pocket. Suddenly, everything began to spin, our once gleaming dream reduced to shattered fragments spread across our ruin. I slammed the phone down, feeling an overwhelming urge to scream until my throat bled. Panic bubbled in my chest as we sat across from each other, surrounded by stacks of papers that loomed over us with an unfamiliar threat. What was meant to be our safe haven had turned into a grotesque nightmare, orchestrated by merciless players in this cutthroat market. My thoughts turned vengeful, imagining how this betrayal could unravel not just us, but the illusions of trust we'd held onto throughout the process. I was filled with an urgency to protect what little we had left before trusting Lisa again felt like handing over my wallet to a pickpocket. That evening, as shadows crept into our home, I decided I could no longer depend on anyone else to navigate this murky territory. I turned to the glowing screen of my laptop, pouring every ounce of rage into research. Late into the night, I dug through forums and articles, piecing together a broader picture of ethical misconduct in real estate transactions throughout Chicago. The more I uncovered, the more the connections seemed to grow. Unqualified agents filling their coffers, while unsuspecting buyers fell victim to their treachery. It wasn't just our battle. Every click of the mouse drew me deeper into a labyrinth of deceit, page after page revealing cover-ups and conflicts of interest, too numerous to ignore. The insatiable thirst for profit at the cost of people echoed throughout the city, and with every horror story I encountered, I felt the fire within me ignite further. With a mixture of adrenaline and righteous indignation, I began diagramming a plan. What if we fought back? What if, instead of wallowing in despair, we could take the fight to the heart of this shady practice? When dawn broke the next day, igniting the skyline with fiery colors, I stood firm in the face of this aberration. The morning air was crisp as renewed determination washed over me, and I knew that was only the beginning. I understood that I needed to confront the truth, whatever form it came in, even if it revealed a darkness we had never anticipated. I would expose them, both Lisa and Karen, and maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to solid ground amidst this tremulous journey. Dim touches of hope flickered alive, promising freedom from our predicament, But the fight was just beginning. What schemes had these charlatans plotted beyond this point? Would I risk it all to unveil the truth, or would fear of their retaliation bind me? With every heartbeat, I felt the thrill of battle growing. As the shadows in my mind warned of impending chaos, yet I felt fully alive at the precipice of confrontation. The afternoon sun hung precariously low in the Chicago sky, casting long shadows that crept through the window of my temporary workspace, a cluttered kitchen table laden with paperwork and desperation. I felt a weight settling on my shoulders, one that edged into the realm of hopelessness, as Jake and I sat across from each other. Our hearts were as entwined in this process as the papers strewn between us, documents that promised safety and stability, but instead delivered sheer chaos. With Karen breathing down our necks, and Lisa, our so-called ally, reveling in the frenzy she had orchestrated, this nightmare showed no signs of relenting. A new strategy was essential, and fast. After days spent unraveling the web of deceit spun by our realtor and rival, we decided to seek counsel from a lawyer specializing in real estate fraud. Another disheartening afternoon saw us in his office, where the scent of stale coffee mingled with desperation. The attorney, a middle-aged man with a weary demeanor, listened as we recounted the absurdity of our plight, the ever-spiraling counteroffers, the whispered confessions of a rival, the ethical breaches that seemed to ooze from every transaction. But when he delivered the crushing news, we felt the ground drop away beneath us. The laws regarding insider information in the Windy City felt murky at best, and the prospect of litigation left us nothing more than frustrated and helpless. "There's not much we can do unless you have concrete evidence of wrongdoing," he said, his tone sympathetic but firm. As we left the attorney's office, a pall of dread enveloped us like an evening fog. Each step felt heavier than the last, compounded by the realization that every escalation in the bidding war merely paved the way for Lisa to collect ever larger commissions. As we approached our front door, a chilling dread gripped my stomach. Had we truly lost, not just the house, but our faith in the very real estate process, meant to serve honest people? Just when I thought I couldn't bear another moment of turmoil, I stumbled upon an unmarked envelope resting on our doorstep, a stark contrast against the welcoming, worn wood. My heart raced as I picked it up, curiosity mingling with a growing sense of foreboding. I opened the note with trembling hands, the handwriting a haphazard scrawl that conveyed only one message: "Back off, or you'll regret it." Suddenly, shadows flickered in the corners of my mind. Who could this have come from? Was it a warning from Karen, enraged that we dared to stand in her way? Or was it Lisa, angry at the threat to her income and reputation? The world I had once thought expansive now felt constricted and suffocating, an echo chamber brimming with threats and untrustworthiness. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt the chill of night seeping through my skin. Each moment spent in our home felt tainted, and my panic came to a head when I realized I was no longer just battling for a property. I was embroiled in a fight for survival, for morality, for trust. I was shaking, solitude creeping in as doubt washed over my convictions. It was enough to drive anyone to madness. My thoughts darted to the community gathering we had planned for that weekend, an annual event where neighbors would come together for camaraderie and gossip. But this time, I sensed an impending storm. Then came the news I never expected. Karen brought the house down at the gathering. In a move that shocked everyone, including me, she dropped a bombshell. The former client of Lisa's, a local couple who had fallen victim to her underhanded dealings, spoke out about the unethical practices they had been subjected to. As the whispers grew, I could see the crowd's disbelief morph into a mix of indignation and curiosity. How long had this been going on, hidden behind the guise of a friendly face? Fear surged in me as I realized we might not be too late to expose a system deeply entrenched in deceit. The locals were awakened to the broader implications of our story, perhaps spurred into action by this testimony. The walls that had once seemed insurmountable now felt less imposing. The cracks of truth were beginning to emerge. Fists clenched tightly. I exchanged glances with Jake, who was just as startled. The realization hit us. We weren't isolated in this battle anymore. If Karen's revelation could stir the pot so rapidly, perhaps our own experiences could amplify the noise. We gathered our courage and defiance. Determination sparked anew. It became clear that we needed to harness this moment, not only for our own futures, but for the countless others who had likely suffered at the hands of unscrupulous agents and a tepid system that turned a blind eye. With a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins, I resolved that we must gather our documents and take the plunge, contact our community, rally our neighbors, and expose the truth of this sordid war. We needed to share our story widely, to format each grievance and each encounter with Lisa and Karen into a narrative that would resonate, reverberating through the walls of Chicago. Could we shape this emerging scandal? Or would it become just another tale lost in the void of complacency? One thing was certain. The stakes had risen, and our resolve was only just beginning to crystallize. With hope renewed against the overwhelming fear, I found balance once again. Perhaps this was the moment we could flip the narrative on its head, marching into victory o'er the pitfall of what could become our greatest fear, an angry backlash from those we had dared to cross. The shadows of uncertainty still loomed large, but rather than cower from them, I adopted a stance of defiance. As Karen's words echoed in my mind, the question lingered: could we truly seek justice, or were we unknowingly stepping into a snake pit filled with more than just snakes? As the clock struck midnight, the quiet hum of the city felt like a million voices whispering my name, urging me to take action. My partner and I sat in the dim light of our living room, casting shadows of doubt alongside flickering candles. I had spent the last few days frantically documenting everything I could find on the dealings of our realtor Lisa and our rival Karen. Just when I believed I could finally form a cohesive strategy, the harsh truth sliced through my thoughts. My partner wanted to abandon the whole quest. They expressed a need to prioritize their mental health, a plea that crushed the dreams we had built together. Sitting across from me, Jake's eyes brimmed with uncertainty and exhaustion. I could feel that same weight settling heavily on my shoulders as I considered their plea. The bidding war had morphed into a monstrous beast, devouring not just our hopes for a home, but encroaching on the foundation of our relationship. I longed for united front in this battle against deception, but the growing rift made me question if pursuing the house was worth losing each other. Just then, a fierce spark ignited within me. I couldn't sit back and allow our dreams to die in a system riddled with corruption. No, this wasn't merely about a brownstone anymore. It had spiraled into battling the culture of corruption, eroding the Chicago real estate market. I felt renewed determination flow through me as I turned to Jake, who hesitantly nodded as I explained my plan. Together, we would compile evidence of Lisa's malpractice and ring the alarm about the unethical game that had taken root in our community. We needed to reach out to local media to tell our story, to turn this plight into a meaningful expose that could resonate and inspire action. In that moment of clarity, a sense of purpose overcame the frayed edges of our partnership. The fear and anxiety that had clung to my thoughts transformed into a battle cry. We began mapping out our findings, piecing together everything we had gathered: the threats, the backdoor dealings, the emotional torment. Each revelation felt like stepping deeper into a vast labyrinth of deceit. But at least now, we were driven not just by our desire for the brownstone, but by the hope of disrupting the system that allowed agents like Lisa and adversaries like Karen to thrive. It was a welcome departure from our earlier approach. Instead of reacting passively, we were ready to go on the offensive. As we reached out to contacts through social media and local community boards, the response was extraordinary. Neighbors recognized that our turmoil could be theirs, their stories intertwining with ours, as they offered support and encouragement. Slowly but surely, I could feel the atmosphere shifting around us, a shared sense of purpose entwining restless spirits determined to challenge the status quo. One evening, I received a message from an investigative journalist interested in our saga. "I've followed Lisa Anderson's dealings for years, and your case might be the catalyst for larger changes in the industry," she wrote, her enthusiasm palpable. I felt my heart race as hope ignited in my chest again. This was a glimmer, a spark that could light the fire of accountability in a system steeped in darkness. Together, we would weave our narrative into the larger story of corruption, aiming to expose Lisa and her ally, Karen, in their insidious game of greed. The reality was sinking in as we prepared to meet with the journalist. The time was now, and we could no longer allow fear or doubt to paralyze us. As the deadline for submission loomed, late nights became the rhythm of our lives, filled with excited brainstorming about every angle we could uncover about the deceitful pair. The thought of rallying our community, the promise of shining a light on these unethical practices, fueled our resolve in a way I hadn't thought possible just days before. And then a twist of fate struck. We discovered a hidden cache of emails among the documents I had painstakingly accumulated that detailed Lisa's discussions with Karen, conversations that hinted at their plans to manipulate the bidding war. Each email laid bare their schemes, an undeniable alliance bent on exploiting us and others like us. I could feel the rush of adrenaline mount. We had discovered proof that could send shockwaves through the brokerage community. Reinvigorated and with purpose beyond our own desires, we marched forward, ready to expose every lie, every misstep. I couldn't help but feel that this fight extended beyond the four walls of any brownstone. It was about illuminating the darkness that overshadowed the entire home-buying experience in Chicago. As dawn broke on a new day, I could sense the tides shifting. We had ignited a true scandal, one that dared to dismantle the very structures we had battled against. Would we be able to rally enough support to elicit real change? Or would we find ourselves ensnared in a far more treacherous game than we had anticipated? The evening sky settled into a deep shade of indigo, with the city lights flickering like fireflies before me. I stood quietly on the balcony of our temporary rental, surrounded by the comforting hum of life in Chicago. With each pulse of the city, I felt emboldened by the whirlwind of exposure we had unleashed on the local real estate scene. Our pain was spilling into the open, and the darkness that had clouded my days was becoming a crescendo of justice. Just hours before, our story had gone live on social media, and I was overcome with a mix of anxious anticipation and fierce pride at what we had accomplished. The online frenzy had ignited a tidal wave of attention not just on our plight, but on a systemic failure that stretched much deeper into Chicago's vibrant yet treacherous real estate market. A few well-articulated posts gained traction, and soon, hashtags like Expose Lisa and Karen the Fraud began trending within our community. Calls for accountability reverberated through the feeds as people shared their own harrowing experiences of manipulation and greed, their voices harmonizing in a chorus that echoed to the very neighborhoods where families built their dreams. Was this the moment it would all change? The investigative journalist who had reached out to us earlier promised to dive deeper into the evidence we provided. She sent us a message that morning. I've uncovered something revelatory about Lisa Anderson and her ties to dirty money. It's not just your case. It's systemic. My heart raced with hope and agitation, brimming with anticipation of what revelations lay ahead. Although we felt like small players in an overwhelming game of corruption, we were no longer alone in our fight. We were becoming the face of a movement, a rallying cry against unscrupulous practices that had plagued so many hopeful homeowners. As the sun began its descent into the horizon, creating an effervescent glow over the skyscrapers, more threads of truth unfurled in the media. We learned Lisa was not just dealing with Karen. Her web of deceit extended far and wide, ensnaring countless clients while lining her pockets with ill-gotten gains. Emails dripped with insincerity, capturing the details of bribes and promises made between her and various affluent buyers. The Chicago Real Estate Board found itself in the firing line, deliberating over sweeping changes as calls for accountability grew louder. But in our neighborhood, the fallout was deeply personal. Karen, that once confident adversary who had towered over us like a looming storm cloud, slowly unraveled after the news broke. The gossip spread like wildfire, and I had to stifle a wave of vindictiveness as I watched her huddle on her front porch, pale and trembling, her once pristine reputation now drenched in disgrace. I imagined the smirk she wore when articulating how invincible she felt while pushing us to outbid ourselves, how the tables had turned. Was it wrong to feel satisfaction as her mighty facade crumbled into despair? As her precious connections shared whispers of this scandal, Karen had become an overnight pariah. Friends were distancing themselves, and community members were sharing stories of how she had misconducted herself in previous dealings. I could almost see the mental gears turning in her head, realizing that the privileged wall she had built around herself had become her prison. While I struggled with the morality of gloating over her downfall, I reminded myself of the lives that had been affected by her deceitful practices. We were determined to forge a new path and avoid becoming victims of other unregulated vices. Our late-night discussions had transformed from plans about the brownstone to strategies centered around advocacy, and the sense of empowerment was intoxicating. We envisioned speaking at community meetings, advocating for homeowners trapped in the cycle of manipulation we'd witnessed firsthand. In only days, our small injustice had sparked conversations in coffee shops, at parks, everywhere we wandered. Strangers suddenly approached us with knowing glances and nods, their eyes reflecting a shared understanding of what it felt to be played. We were on a mission. Now commitments were made among our growing circle of supporters to make real, tangible changes in how real estate was conducted in Chicago. Eventually, the phone rang with an all-too-familiar name flashing on my screener, Private Investigator. "I have news," she exclaimed breathlessly, barely containing her enthusiasm. She divulged intricate details uncovered in her research about how Lisa and Karen had blurred lines with their dealings, violating multiple ethical codes that could lead to their disbarment. This was something we could escalate. As we reveled in this new foundation of information, I felt the anticipation bubble within me, a potent mixture of fear and determination. Would this expose truly bring down the corporate monsters, or would they slink back into the shadows, their corruption further hidden? Late that night, as the glowing skyline pulsed under the expansive Chicago sky, I savored the delicate balance of despair and hope that lingered in the air. The fight was far from over. Yet, I felt a refreshing kind of clarity wash over me. Peace intertwined with purpose as I began to draft our next steps. We would not only seek justice for ourselves, but shine a light on the broader culture of greed that had stricken so many others. We would weave our experiences into a compelling narrative that demanded reform, echoing in the chambers of power, until real change came. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope blooming amidst the ashes of what could have been.